Yeah, good morning, everyone. Today it's our third lecture from Voice of Experts. So, on behalf of Alpha Forensic Group's organization, Nirusa will just host this event. So, Nirusa, you can just go on.
So, good afternoon to one and all present here. I'm Nirosha Suresh Babu, standing on behalf of Alpha Foundations to welcome you all to this amazing session of Voice of Experts Lecture 3. We have a few Alpha Legal and Forensic Access Private Limited, Asian Institute of Human Science and Development, Malaysian Criminological and Correctional Association, Afford Forensic Society India. We also have Indian Society of Medical Legal Experts as well. Alpha has emerged as a great reckoning force and a dynamic forensic organization at the dawn of the century. Alpha is established, high qualified and experienced forensic professionals to provide best forensic investigation and educational services. Recent of the years, we have continued to provide high quality forensic services to lawyers, advocates, courts, police forces, and to private individuals as well. Alpha is a government registered organization, and that is a highly respected independent forensic science expertise or service provider in India. Today, we have our speaker as Dr. Karavi Barman. She has been associated with NEF Law College and as an assistant professor since 2010. She's done her LLB from Osmania University, Hyderabad, securing her first class in 2007. She's also done her LLM with distinction from Osmania University as well. She's also published few papers and also have been judging few moot court sessions. Ma'am, we are welcoming you to this session. She will be speaking on COVID-19 and the right to education. Ma'am, you can take the session and please go ahead.
Thank you, Nirisha.
I request everyone to please mute your mics. And if you're willing to put your camera on, please do sit in a proper position. And your queries shall be put in the chat box. Don't ask it out loud. Please mention them in your chat box. And those who are viewing YouTube live, please put it in the live chat. Ma'am, you can take over.
Yes, thank you, Nirosha. Good afternoon, everybody. The topic that we have taken for deliberation today is the impact of COVID-19 and right to education in India, an overview. That means here I'm here to give you an overview about the education scenario in India. So let me start with a comment of Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, a revolutionary, he stated that a true revelation of society's soul can be traced from the way it deals with its children. Right to education is a basic human right. All across the globe, the learners are affected as the COVID-19 pandemic shows no signs of abating any time zone. The pandemic has hit the basic services, and certainly right to education is not an exception. The impact of the virus is predicted to be even more dangerous among the vulnerable group, though the government is trying its level best so that access to learning and teaching could be maintained and so that the kids retain knowledge and skills through distance or alternate learning programs. With the onslaught of COVID-19, we all know that the entire schedule has gone for a toss. But teaching and learning still remains the mandate of a welfare state.
Rose Martin
Education
was
is a life saving mechanism for many. And if the COVID-19 pandemic goes out of its hand in India, then streamlining education would be really very, very difficult and it would be beyond imagination. Maybe the picture will be so gloomy that we cannot imagine even in the wildest. This deliberation is particularly on the topic as to how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted upon the educational system in a very grave and serious manner. I would like to point out here there are certain pointers that which speaks about the pandemic challenges in educational scenario, the current scenario. Firstly, with the sea change of the educational sector, there is a mixed response in the teaching and learning process. But when we say there's a mixed response, that means we are talking about that there's a mixed response in the urban and rural scenario. While the urban society, we see that to a considerable extent, everything is going on in a fine manner. The elite schools, for them, education is in continuous process. It has not come to a halt. Whereas a very gloomy situation could be seen in the rural areas. There are many pitfalls which makes in which process still the right to education is inaccessible. The pertinent issue is that while the pandemic forced India into expanding its educational sector into online platforms, the woes of the rural children remains unanswered. Despite various legislations on the part of the government to push the learners into the digital space, the gateway of the problems afflicting the education system in the rural areas still maintains a status quo. Second pointer is that rural India struggles alone to reach the doorsteps of elementary education. The central focus is not on the violation. The main focus is on the accessibility issue. There are 3 A's which is the main focus of discussion: accessibility, adaptability, acceptability. Closure of the schools is to combat the pandemic and not to deprive the right to education. Such a step is the need of the hour because the concerns relating to pandemic indicates that the disease is more prone to the vulnerable, that is to the younger children from 0 to 10 years and the aged persons above 65 years. The government at this stage is trying to combat the pandemic, which is much more of a concern not only to the India but to the world at large. This is the worst enemy which is attacking the world. So abruptly opening schools would be certainly an erroneous step at this hour of crisis, as the major focus is on social distancing, and hence accumulation of children would expose them to a major threat. Daily lots of cases are reported, and global studies warns that children can lead to the continuation of transmission chain, and another study also indicates that children can carry high level of viral load in their body just as adults. These are the factors that will probably decide when and how our children can go back to schools. The world seems to be in a rush to reopen schools, right from Asia to Middle East to Europe. But question is about the good sanitary conditions. The third pointer is that researchers in China and Germany warns that youngsters can continue the transmission chain. A team of international researchers have found out that children under the age of 14 years has the triple the number of contacts as adults. That too, the children are asymptomatic. That is without any symptoms. They can be silent carriers. In that case, schools might turn into nurseries of infections. The fourth pointer, we all know that on March 24, 2020, India witnessed a nationwide lockdown. So here I would like to draw your attention, your kind attention to the lower strata of society who came out in searching for food, and many incidents were reported where they were also arrested for theft. And it was then that point of time the government realized that essential services should be distributed among them. But here I would like to draw your attention to the number of children who might be affected in these families. Fifth, the very pandemic COVID-19 is based on speculations. At first, the government declared lockdown for 14 days because it was speculated that the virus would die in that time. It is really very difficult to hold the government responsible at this stage for the disruption of the education, in the sense that if the matter is looked from a neutral point of view, then we can see that the government is trying its level best. At the same time, we see that the whole issue revolves around a disease which is based only on speculation, and so far no vaccine has developed. Even the WHO also from time to time is giving its report. Recently, it also came out that it is the airborne disease. I would like to here mention that India, the law which was there, that is the Epidemic Disease Act 1897. Epidemic Disease Act 1897, which is 123 years old. It was incorporated by the Britishers. And in that time, there were no mechanisms also for handling. So now, that means in 2020, the Epidemic Disease Amendment Ordinance 2020 was passed on April 22nd. Again, I repeat that this Epidemic Disease Act 1897 is 123 years old, and from that time, you see that means the act has come before, the act was before the commencement of the Constitution, and from that time, it was not the need of the hour. Because India is for the first time facing such crisis where not only India, the entire world, the pandemic is a threat for the entire world. Now the Epidemic Disease Amendment Act Ordinance 2020 with certain guidelines on April 22nd, it was put forward. But India is the second largest populated country in the world and hence does not have requisite machineries. Testing on such a huge population would be really a Herculean task for the government. Moreover, trial and error is the only step for the stakeholders, be it the doctors or the executive, all the respective domains. The people are all the respective domains. They are trying to work harder and are associated in trying to control the dreadful disease. Moreover, this is a situation where even the Constitution what lack is the implementation part. The facts and figures, as I would like to cite. Yes, am I audible?
Ma'am, could you please tell it from a bit before, because your net got disconnected, I feel.
Okay.
So
yes.
Yeah, and ma'am, should we share these slides or
yes, I
now?
will sum up. I will let you know.
Okay, sure, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank
Yes, thank
you.
you. Okay, I would like to draw some facts and figures. There are some statistics which I would like to point before you. 91% of the world's student population are affected. UNESCO is facilitating the countries, and the reports estimate that the coronavirus pandemic will adversely affect 290 million students in 22 countries. The UNESCO estimates that 32 crore students are affected in India, and no doubt that digital learning is a solution but it has also created a divide between the have and the have-nots. However, I would like to mention that India is also progressing because with the MOOC, that is Massive Open Online Course, with the Massive Online Open Course, which is an online course aimed at unlimited participation and open access via the Web India is the considered to be the biggest in the world market, just next to USA. But dropout rates are also very high due to the lack of atmosphere of study. India has 1.4 million schools, 2.01 million schools enrolled in government schools from standard class 1 to class 8 and an additional 3.8 million enrolled in standard 9 to 10, which is clearly reflected in UDISC report, that is the Unified District Information System for Education report. Approximately 29% of India's population are children and 19.29 is in the age group from 6 to 14 years. This group is of course entitled to the protection under the RTA, Right to Information Act. The annual statistics education report rural area reveals in 2018 that out of 590 schools, 596 government schools, out of 596 government schools in 619 districts, only 21.3% of the students have access to computers. That means we can see that these are the statistics which shows that very meager portion are having access to the computers. Now here I would like to draw your attention to the constitutional perspective, because when the Constitution of India was the Constituent Assembly, when it was discussing, when the Constitutional Assembly debates were going on regarding the how the Constitution should be, then it was inspired by the national leaders like Raja Ram Mohan Roy. He brought about the sati system, he abolished the sati system. So like that, the national leaders, what role it has played, it is, as I said you, that Raja Ram Mohan Roy, he abolished the sati system. Like that, many national leaders had their contributions, and these national leaders, taking into account the talks of these national leaders in this Constituent Assembly, the founding fathers, they were debating. The founding fathers were debating as to how the Constitution would function. What will be the aims of the Constitution? What will be the objective of the Constitution? So the objective resolution was passed by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru on 13 December 1946, and on 22nd January 1947 it was placed. The objective resolution itself shows that it was a Herculean task for the framers, because they had to, not that they were only making a document, they had to depend on the document which the entire country would be abide by it. Because our constitutional framers, when they have taken the Constitution, they adopted the accountability principle from the UK. Accountability, not only periodic accountability, but also daily accountability. That means in routine accountability. So our government is accountable. We are living in the parliamentary form of government. The model is parliamentary. That means even the ministers, they cannot decide anything on their own. They have to depend upon the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. Doctrine of collective responsibility plays a very important role here. Now, when we talk about the constitutional provisions, Article 14 clearly says, today we see that there is gross violation of Article 14, because Article 14 clearly says that the state shall not deny equality before law and equal protection of law within the territory of India. Intelligible differentia is used here because Article 14 forbids class legislation but allows reasonable classification. So class legislation is forbidden, but despite that we see the digital barriers, because the haves and the have-nots, which we cannot do away with. Article 15 clause 3 talks about the protection of the women and children. That means children were always the center of attention. Article 24, it has prohibited regarding the children regarding the children working or putting into the hazardous work. Article 45 of the Directive Principles of State Policy, it clearly says that right to education for 6 to 14 years should be mandatory, and it shall be the mandate of the welfare state to see that education continues. Of course, beyond the 14 years also, it has to continue, but it would depend upon the resources of the state whether it can make it mandatory or not. Because education is a subject which is incorporated in the concurrent list. So the state and center both has to put forward and both has to work for it. Article 350A, in order, it has also given emphasis on the mother tongue so that education could be made available to all, even the more deplorable ones could know about it. And in order to make it convenience, mother tongue also was made mandatory. Fundamental duties, part 4A, it has an article, that is Article 51K, Article 51A, Clause A, Clause K, which also says that even the parents are under the obligation. The parents, they are under the obligation to send their children to school. So they cannot run away or they cannot uh, do away with their duties. Article 39, Clause F, where we talk about directive principles, we know that these are directions to the state, and also it was stressed that no children should be put into the exploitation. That means, in fact, it is a duty of the state to protect the children from exploitation. If we talk about now, if we talk about the constitutional provisions, from where it has, if you see the first document on RTE, I would like to point out the first document of RTE, that is the Rammurthy report of 1990. When I talk to you regarding the Rammurthy report of 1990, there are certain pointers which I would like to bring. The approaches, what were the approaches? Let's see. The approaches of the Rammurthy Committee 1990 were: first, equity and social justice; second, decentralization of education at all levels; then establishment of participative educational order; next, inculcation of value-based education; and next, empowerment of work. That means all these were the recommendations which were put in 1990 itself by the Rammurthy Committee report, which was the first educational document. And this report came after the implementation of the National Policy on Education 1986. The Rammurthy report, it evaluated this NPE 1986 policy. There were certain recommendations which were put in the Rammurthy report, which I would like to draw your attention. See, in the why I am drawing the attention, because we should be aware that in 1990 itself such recommendations were given, because today the accessibility has become a major problem. It's a threat. But regarding this infrastructure, in 1990 itself, it was pointed out. There are some recommendations. Number one, development of common school system, in the sense that government schools should be transformed through quality improvement. Secondly, promotion of value education. Thirdly, promotion of education of women. Fourth, removing disparities in education. Today, the disparity is a major factor. The distinction between have and have nots. Whereas this resolution was taken long time back in the year 1990, and this is 2020. Educational programs, development of infrastructural facilities, this was stressed long time back. Early childhood care and education, RTE, which is a fundamental right when we talk about the RTE Act. Now, prior RTE Act, I would like to throw here that the RTE Act, Right to Education Act, clearly says that education should be made mandatory for the 6 to 14 years of age, and also it should be seen that each and every people, they get education from 6 to 14 years of age, and this is a mandate of a welfare state, which each and every state should take the initiative. Prior to the RTE Act, National Program for Nutritional Support to Primary Education, or the midday meal scheme, was introduced. That is the Madhyan Bhojan Yojana. It is a centrally sponsored scheme launched on 15th August 1995, and the results were also seen to be very, very positive. And let me mention you one thing that is very, very important, that even in this lockdown period, even in like before the nationwide lockdown also, there was midday meal skill distribution was going on. Of course, now it has come to a halt to many extent, but it was going on. The 35-day schemes, it was divided in 3 days. 35-day midday meals, they had done certain schemes and they had divided in 3 days. So I would like to, so now what I would like to, before I bring the initiatives of the government, one thing I would like to stress is that if we are saying that government has not violated, or the state has not violated the right to education of our young children, then we can say that education is reaching all. But where we want to say, where we want to focus our thing to, now it is upon us. See, recently it was seen that in one of the funeral ceremonies, so many people gathered. So if where was the government? Where was the police part at that point of time? So if the government is not vigilant now, then what will happen in future about the right to education? Because already the educational centers are turned into quarantine centers. So many. Moreover, we have already seen that RT Act was not that successful also, because there were many loopholes. There were many loopholes that were pointed out in the RT Act. I would like to draw your attention before we go to the initiatives. The NCPCR, that is the National Commission for Protection of Children Rights 2005. The National Commission for Protection of Children Rights 2005 contemplates about the RT Act, which clearly states that in the previous year itself, 5,000 complaints were lodged in the previous year. And post-outbreak, that is beyond March 2020, it has increased eightfold. So we can understand how much it has increased, eightfold. That means there were a gap in the RTE Act itself, which the government could have been vigilant before the pandemic. Now, when we talk about the number of contractual teachers, we can see that daily reports are indicating that they are devoid. They are not getting their salaries, in fact. But teaching and learning process has to continue, no doubt. But how? That's why we see many initiatives are taken in the rural village. When I have done a survey, then I found out that in rural village, the teachers before the lockdown, the teachers were trying their level best so that education reaches the needy through the WhatsApp, through the video, through the audio. They were trying their level best. And then what they used to do, suppose the more vulnerable class people are not getting education, then what they used to do, they used to suppose one of the maths teacher whom I happened to interview, he used to bring the children under the tree and he used to teach in the blackboard, because of the accessibility issue. He used to draw in circles. He used to draw and he used to make the children sit and teach 5 days. But again, of course, they are the vulnerable class in the villages. They are the worst sufferers because classes couldn't continue, sometimes because of the rain or any other natural calamities. So ultimately, they are the worst sufferers. Here, I would also like to bring your attention to the fact that the government, what about the disabled children? Because as per nobody is talking. If you see the paper reports of anything, nobody is talking about the disabled children today. What about the children with disabilities? Who would take care of them? Because despite the government's initiative, it is brought through Doordarshan or any other channels. But what about the disabled children? They are the worst sufferers. According to the 2011 census, when I had searched regarding the disabilities, I would like to point out here the number of persons with disabilities, that is seeing 19%, hearing 19%, mental retardation 6%, mental illness 3%, any other disability 18%, and multiple disabilities, that is 8%. So the status of the school attendance of the disability proportion from 5 to 19 years of age in India, according to 2011 census, is already attending education institution 61%, never attended 27%, attended earlier 12%. So here I would like to draw your attention to the thing that disability of the children with disabilities, this has not become the talk of the day. A real research is required because even the government is not talking about the children suffering from disabilities. But of course, we cannot do away with the fact that after there is a the role of the government before the pandemic and after the pandemic is different. We have to agree that, because in educational sector, I'm talking about particularly in educational sector, because before the pandemic, no doubt that RT Act, as I told you, it has many loopholes. So many complaints has been filed as by in the monitoring agency. But after the pandemic, the government, of course, is very much vigilant, and it is trying its level best. But of course, like as I told you, that so many people they assembled in the funeral. And recently, it was seen, the reports indicated, though it should have been such that the social distancing now is the prime focus. For that, the schools are shut, everything is shut. Now, for that, if the disease happens to aggravate, then there will be a major problem. If the disease happens to aggravate, why? Because again, the schools would continue to be closed, and indirectly, or you can also say directly, right to education is affected. It is impacted. So definitely, not only the government, we all, each and every individual, we have to be vigilant. There are certain direct impacts, like destruction of school, uncertainty of attendance, because in the virtual platform, attendance, it is not possible to monitor. Then we know that schools have been turned into the quarantine centers. Then when we if I talk about the indirect impacts, then affecting children through the displacement, because as we see, number of laborers, they are displaced. The there is the migrant laborers. What about the migrant laborers? See, so many migrant laborers, they had to lose their livelihood, because the problem, life or livelihood, that has become a major issue now. So with this, so many migrant laborers, we can understand the number of children who are affected, and they are forced into child labor, child trafficking, and also child marriage. Because I would like to mention here that in many states, more particularly in UP, there are many cases reported of child marriage even in times of COVID-19. And the children are forced to, because now midday meals is also not becoming possible. So the children, they are definitely the worst sufferer, especially in the rural community. Some of the initiatives which I would like to mention that our government have taken, that is, first, Digital India. Now, through this Digital India, no doubt the government had tried its level best, but before it could it could make it more accessible, the pandemic happened. But of course, we cannot ignore the fact that in many remote villages, at least, there is still electricity problem, not to speak about the internet. Secondly, also the governments have taken initiative. Many apps are there, e-Pathshala, Swam, Diksha, many apps are introduced. Then if you talk about Delhi, in Delhi also, so that there's coordination between the parents and teachers, the schools have taken initiative, and also a website has been launched. Kerala, we know that Kerala is the first state. I would like to tell here that Kerala is the first state. After the pandemic, it has immediately made the internet free for all, so that teaching and learning process, so that the education system goes on. On April 12, 2020, Bharat Padhe Online was initiated by the Ministry of HRD. Then, as I already mentioned, Doordarshan, All India Radio, these things were initiated so that at least the learning process could continue. Pradhan Mantri Gramin Digital, this Abhigyan, it seeks to certify 6 crore as digitally literate, but less than 50%. It has reached to less than 50%. That means one thing we can, here I would like to divide two things. Firstly, after the pandemic, the government is taking initiative in case of education. But before the pandemic, they were not that vigilant. Had they been that much vigilant, how much effort it is giving now so that the students are not facing any accessibility issue, then these pointers wouldn't have taken place, these pointers wouldn't have become the talk of the day. Like, because if we talk about some of the case laws, I would like to highlight, though there are very few cases, but still I would like to highlight, like in Mohini Jain's case, it was said that right to education is a fundamental right. However, there it was also said that education is not a commodity, because it was the first capitation fee case. But then it was overruled, and in Unikrishnan versus state of AP, it was clearly held that right to education is a fundamental right, and it should be in light of Article 45. It should be a DPSP, Article 45. That means 6 to 14 years, of course, it is mandatory. The state has to see that accessibility the students are getting. But when we talk about the other way around, in case of the private unaided educational institution, they of course have their own rules, to which there is minimal interference. Another case, this is a very important case, Fahima Shireen RK versus State of Kerala and others. In this case, it was clearly held that right to have access to internet is a fundamental right. I repeat, Fahima Shireen RK versus State of Kerala. It was clearly held that right to have access to education is a fundamental right. The court opined that the state should ensure that the children were armed with modern technologies, because our constitution itself aimed at equitable quality to all children. That means it aimed at quality education for all children. Recently, we have seen that the Karnataka High Court, this is another case of the Karnataka High Court, we have seen that the Karnataka High Court says government ban on online classes, as it says that it is violation of the RT Act and Article 21A. Article 21A, which has come from by the 86th Amendment. So in that case, it was argued that the government, there were two orders on 15th June and 27th June. On 15th June, it was said that there should be a ban on the online education. But on 27th, it was said that online education can continue from the from the LKG to class 5 level, because it was stressed that if online education goes on, government, from the side of the government, it was argued that if the online education goes on, suppose there are 5 children, 3 children are getting because of the digital divide, and 2 children are not getting. Moreover, the courses have already commenced. So under that, what about those 2 children who are not getting? So in that case, it is deprivation. It was the mandate that the state should provide free education for 6 to 14 years. Moreover, what about the kindergarten children? The online education, they are, because kindergarten is nothing but about the personality development. So through online education, they are not being able to reach. They are outside the reach, actually, because when we talk about personality development, there should be a touch of the teacher. Now, the executive orders passed by the governments on 15th and 27th June, it was held that it encroached upon the fundamental right. And this order was given as per Article 162, which says that Article 162 of the Indian Constitution cannot be used to take away the fundamental right already given under Article 21 and 21A. Imposing ban on online class by schools from LKG to class 10 is void. There was no rational basis for curtailing the online classes or banning the online classes, because as per the statistics provided there, 1.4 crore students are there in the state. Around 44 lakh students are enrolled in government schools, 13.60 lakh in private aided schools, and around 45 lakh students are studying in private unaided schools. Among them, 58.61 lakh of urban areas and 45.88 lakh in rural areas. So it was argued that when that online education has to continue, and banning it, which would definitely affect the fundamental rights. But another thing here, I would like to, here it was argued that allowing online education doesn't mean that a separate fee can be charged. But online education cannot be banned because merely because some are not getting it, that doesn't mean that the so-called elite class or the so-called elite schools, they also should be deprived of the online education. There is no rational basis for doing it. Moreover, it was said that no doubt that the government should take initiative, that right to education should be adjusted in such a manner that the education should be able to reach the needy. It should be able to get through the gateway, or it should be able to reach the doorsteps of the needy, rather than the children struggling to get the right of education. But at the same time, if any, and at the same time, effort should be on getting, that means the main focus should be so that the education becomes accessible. So instead of doing that, the state was trying to take away education from those also who were having the access. So instead of doing that, those for whom education is not accessible, the state should take drastic measures so that education becomes needy for them, rather than snatching away or taking away, thereby depriving the fundamental right of education through online mode to those who can get hold of it. If the digital divide is creating a gap, it is the responsibility of the state to see that accessibility can be maintained. But here I would like to talk about the international reports, because internationally also it was said that right to education is a fundamental right according to Article 26 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 13 and 14 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and these two are the human rights treaties. That means if you see, all constitutional rights are more or less, it's a human right, all the constitutional rights. According to UNESCO report, over 1.2 million students are affected nationwide, representing around 73 of the total of the enrolled in the state. The UDHR and ICSCR provide that primary education shall be compulsory and made available to all. On the other hand, secondary education should be subject to the appropriate means and resources of the state. As per ESC, that is Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the right to education is a progressive legislation, though it is dependent on the availability of resources beyond the age of 14 years. The commission, when we talk about the various committee reports, when we talk about the commission, when we talk about the social, economic and cultural rights, it identified 4 interrelated components on right to receive education: availability, accessibility, acceptability, reliability. Again, accessibility, when we talk about accessibility, it is based on the physical accessibility, economic accessibility, non-discrimination. So it becomes the mandate of a welfare state to remove these sort of discrimination and make education available and accessible for all. Because when we when we talk about the suggestions or and the recommendations through this discussion, I would like to recommend that firstly, the teaching also should be considered as an essential service, and through online mode or alternate modes, teaching and learning process cannot stop, because if the root is affected, tomorrow research work will be affected, and if it is done, entire country will be at stake tomorrow. So the future of a nation depends upon its children. If we talk, so value-based education is very much important. Talking about the value-based education, the philosophical part, there are 3 concepts which I would like to highlight. Metaphysics, that is the realization of the ultimate reality. The researchers, it's high time for the researchers, it is high time for the teachers to see that education reaches the needy. The realization of the ultimate reality. This is nothing but the value-based education, which was originally the mandate of a welfare state, and that was something which the Constitution had in its mission and vision. Next, epistemology, which talks about wisdom and knowledge. because simply information and knowledge is not sufficient unless and until we have the wisdom. Because information and knowledge, it can be gathered through the Google also, through any website. But wisdom, it is the sense of responsibility, the sense of belongingness, sociability, compassion. This is value education. The rationality, the forgiveness, that is to generate peace, purity of mind. These are very, very important, because preamble, it talks about justice, social, political, economic, and justice is a commitment by every citizen of the country, because it is said there should be equality of status and opportunity, but there are disparities, and because some are in progress, some are not in progress, some are lagging behind. So primary universal education, it was a campaign by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that despite the disparities, education should be to promote the spirit of values, which is really having significance in the modern world. And also the spirit of friendship, that is to inculcate the spirited moral values in the children. The fundamental duties now has been playing a major role. It is very, very important, because one of the fundamental duty also talks about the all-round development. It talks regarding the obligation on the part of the parents. It talks about the insights. It's high time that we see the insights. And also this pandemic has given chance to the citizens to develop a holistic approach, not only depending upon the political heads, but we should come forward. The teacher should act as a messiah. The 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, or in this, Krishna said, there is a requisite of skill and knowledge. Mere literacy is not education unless we develop a proper perspective so that it can be given to others. That's why today talks are about constitutional morality rather than the constitution talks are about constitutionalism. Because if the constitution is merely a document, but we should remember that a constitution, rather than a document, it is also oath of office. So it is our resolution, it should be our sense of responsibilities, because preamble says we the people of India, people are sovereign, vox populi. So education, the morality and education should be imbibed right from childhood to regulate the society. And also when we talk about education, it is not only mere information, but the spirit of democracy should be there, so that it is our responsible to reach the common good. Because imposing conditions like lockdown, it cannot be said to be the farewell to the fundamental rights. But despite the thing, we should admit that government is trying its level best, at least after the pandemic, and as we have already seen through the various initiatives. Now, another thing here I would like to state here. Before that, I would like to request Niroja to please put the slide. I would like to here bring the please,
Yes, no.
yes.
Just a minute, it will be
Yes,
put
yes.
up soon.
Yes. Yes. The next slide. Next one. Next. Yes. Kindly stop here. Yes, I would just like to focus that right to education. See, right to education and COVID-19. That means right to education is there for whom? The children, the teachers, because the teachers should help, and the state, because the state is responsible morally, socially, legally. At the same time, COVID-19 is acting as a barrier. But how to overcome this barrier? Because this is a pandemic for which there was no law. Because if you see all over, if you see in India, we have no law as to pandemic. We have law only as to the epidemic. That too, there is difference between pandemic and epidemic. So what I would like to say, right to education, which I have focused here, right to education, it is for the children. Right to education. 6 to 14 years of age, if we take from the constitutional perspective or from the RT Act, and the teachers have to have. The teacher's role is very, very important here, because the 6 stages of a teacher, now it's a high time to show the 6 stages of a teacher. That is, first is the teacher is an adhyapak. That means he gives information. Secondly, upadhyaya, information coupled with knowledge. Third, acharya, skill and ability. Fourth, pandit, deep inside. How the teacher goes deep inside, how the teacher tries the level best to be a messiah for those who are not really getting education. Pandit, that means the teacher should go deep inside into the subject. The teacher should be such that the teacher is being able to make the children well equipped. Drishta, visionary views. The teachers should teach the children to think in that manner, with the vision. Next, guru. It is a duty of the guru to able to awaken our wisdom, leading from ignorance to knowledge. That is, leading from darkness to light. That's why here I would like to here draw your attention to one more thing. That is to the theory of the parents patriarch theory. It was a theory of the what you call UK parents patriarch theory. Now it is high time that the teachers play an active role, because the state play an active role, I would like to say, because I have given your state, because parents patriarch theory means the state should play the role of a mother, and it should, just like a mother embraces in case of distress, the state should embrace all the vulnerable children who are really suffering. Article 21, 19 and 14, they are the bedrock of the constitution, and the barriers are 226 and Article 32, because whenever the fundamental rights will be violated, Article 226 and 32 will come into picture. 226, which the High Court, and Article 32, that is the Supreme Court, where fundamental right is guaranteed. And moreover, the 3 organs of the government: legislature, judiciary, and executive. Legislature makes law, but the enforcement, it has to be careful regarding the enforcement machinery, because we can see when in Ram Murthy report was made in the year 1990, 2020, actually not even a single problem should have cropped up after so many years of difference. But due to the lack of the implementation, what lacks in India is the implementation part. And though there is separation of power, but we cannot deny that there is checks and balances. So it's high time that we move through that checks and balances are properly seen. Like if you see executive today, it is not only playing the role of a it is playing dual role today. Executive, the police domain, the eminent domain, the police power. It is not it is playing dual role in a welfare state. First, it is playing the role of a protector of the law of the land, and secondly, it is also protecting its people. So that means it ultimately, what is important, very, very important, rule of law, because whenever the rule of law prevails, each and everything will be accessible, and the young children, and it is the first and foremost duty as we as citizens, each and every stakeholder, we should move forward and protect our young children and help them raise from darkness to light. Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, raising from darkness to light. Next, so this was the substance, because entire deliberation was to point out how right to education was impacted by COVID-19, and what are the duties, how now it is a high time to show our duty, and all the stakeholders, we rise up to be a real messiah. The true spirit of the citizens we can show by developing a holistic approach. Thank you, Nirosa. You can move the next slide. Here, yes, I have given here the introduction, I have referred here MZ Rifi's statement. It is easier to land on the moon than to change the school system, of course. And another thing, we can see that we can see a picture here. The picture here, that is of the urban thing, where very nicely education is going on. Next slide, please. But we can see, though education is a life-saving mechanism, but the government primary schools, see, this is a picture of normal times, where we can see in the assembly time, even the lack of space, as I would like to point out, the infrastructure facility. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, the next. See you can see the classroom. It is this is a rural picture, which is quite different from the urban picture, which is quite different from, as we say, the elite schools. Of course, but here I don't mean to point out that the government instantly can do the thing or change a new. But even in normal times also, if the things are so scattered, proper space is not maintained, then how post COVID-19, what will be the thing? It is really a matter to think about how they are going to maintain the guidelines. Because as in recent interview also, I have found that there are many problems which are going on in villages, regarding in rural areas, in schools. Even RT Act was not, there were many loopholes in RT Act which it has not taken into account, despite various problems, which now by this time it might have been multiplied. Next slide, please. Yes, constitutional. We can see the child caring. That means children are, despite the constitutional perspective, that is, this is nothing but is a promises, but the children are forced, and they are nothing but young children. They are forced to do these sorts of work. Then next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes, this is about the RT Act, which I already discussed. Because India became one of the 135 countries to make the education as a fundamental right for every child when the act came into force on April 1st, 2010, and this is 2020. So we can see where we are lagging behind. Next slide, please. Next. So as I told you, this is the picture. That means even after this after the outbreak of the pandemic also, in this manner, the picture, as I was telling you, the teacher was trying to impart education by maintaining the social distance. But you can see that due to the weather condition, it was not that, it could not continue. Then next slide, please. Midday meals. This is about the midday meals. Of course, it is a centrally sponsored scheme which had been successful to a much extent. The next slide, please. Next. Yes, this is about a school, the National Policy on Education. They have taken the plan of action. Many efforts are there. Then next slide, please. Yes, these are NCERT, CABE, then the Village Education Council. It has been set up for functioning of the school. The District Board of Education, State Department, they are taking the initiative. We can see all these things. They are taking the initiative. And also in higher level education, also continuously the VCs are meeting, and they have taken many recommendations even in UGC level. But since here we are talking about a right to education from 6 to 14 years of age, I would like to say that prime responsibility comes upon the state along with the stakeholders. Next slide, please. Next slide. International reports. Yes, I have already spoken on that. One thing is there, I would like to draw your attention to the third para. Third para, you see, it is already again international reports. It is clearly saying states party to ICSR have an obligation to take deliberate, concrete, and targeted steps towards the full realization of right to education. But in times of COVID-19, this is again also an important factor. In times of COVID-19, the states admittedly does not have obligation to provide all students with digital tools like computers and to ensure access to reliable internet connectivity so that education continues through virtual platform. But it provides that the state should provide the adaptability of education by designing and providing resources for curriculum which reflect the contemporary needs of the students in a changing world. That means what I want to say is that, however, the state should take into account the global health threats. That means global health threats the state should take into account. Right to health, it also flows from Article 21 of the Constitution. It should take into account while seeing the curriculum, while maintaining the curriculum. But this, as the Kerala state have done, it is not mandated that at this time the state can do. It means it depends upon the resources. If we talk about Assam government, if we talk about Assam, no doubt the government is also has taken out so that teaching learning continues. Control the pandemic. Okay, am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You're audible
Okay.
now.
Yes. So what I want to say is that this, of course, there are many in virtual learning. There are many loopholes because we do not know actually whether the children, whether they will be able to catch up. The physical touch is missing, but somehow learning and teaching has to continue. It cannot come to a stop. And the main aim of a welfare state should be this, that it should try to reach the untouchables. Next slide, please. The initiatives of the government, which I had already mentioned. Next slide, please. Yes, next. Yes, the recommendations. The state should play a leading role, thereby acting as an enabler in times of crisis. The government should mandate that the teachers step forward as acting as the true builders of the nation. The role of educational non-governmental organization is an essence. They can act and impart education to the vulnerable group. Holistically planned intervention and taking bird's eye view of the entire developmental need of the children in crisis can definitely fill the vacuum and act as messiah in times of crisis. Teachers' duty should form the part of an essential services during this crisis so that a movement from ignorance to wisdom, darkness to light can be made possible so that the true vision and mission of a nation can be achieved. As rightly said, education is a fundamental human right and essential for the exercise of all other basic rights. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Is there any queries? Please do put that in the chat box down. And ma'am, we have a query.
Yes.
What about the state of West Bengal? 80% of this state population belongs to BPL category, and many of these students from rural areas have committed suicide due to lack of education, especially during the pandemic situation.
Yes. Is that the question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. We are seeing that this is as I said you, this is the worst scenario because so many due to lack of education. Because as I told you, the main problem is, though we are saying that no education is not violated, problem is accessibility, problem is adaptability. But ultimately, if you open the gate and if you open the gate and you think that the chattels will not be in and take your things, I mean, if you open the gate and you say the thief will not enter, that cannot be. Similarly, yes, due to this, accessibility is a major issue because entire, as I have given you the statistical figures, we can see very meager portion are getting right to education. But another thing is that after all, teaching and learning process have to continue. Because some are not getting, that doesn't mean that the one who are getting also should be deprived of, because no doubt Article 14 is there. But at the same time, Article 14 is there. But at the same time, we cannot say that right to education also flows from Article 21. And Article 21 is the foundation of the Indian Constitution, because some are not getting, for that others cannot be deprived of. But yes, if you have raised about the West Bengal, I would like to say the really the government should do something to take care, because really there is a crisis, and accessibility is the main issue. There is a difference in the role of the government before lockdown and after lockdown. After this pandemic, the government is trying its level best, but since, as I already mentioned, since before the pandemic they were not vigilant, so these grassroots level problems are now highlighted. Any other questions, Nirosa?
Any other queries? Okay, according to ma'am, till what time will this pandemic go on? That's another question.
See, that is a question which as I said you, that it is a worst enemy to the world. So that is the question even WHO is not being able to predict. So it is very difficult to predict these things. But if you ask me till what extent the schools will remain closed, that is also very uncertain, because as I already mentioned you earlier only, that COVID-19 pandemic has taken its toll on every mortal in such a manner that it shows no signs of abating any time soon. That's what.
Any other queries? People in YouTube live, you can put your queries in the chat box, live chat down.
Because as I told you, one more thing, this is a time where we also develop a holistic approach. We not simply putting upon the political heads. No doubt they have the power, they can do many things, and they were not vigilant also before the RT Act. As I told you, that there are loopholes, but now they are vigilant. Now they are doing their level best. But of course, to an extent, pandemic is stopping them. And we hope that a post COVID-19 educational scenario would definitely be relieved of the shabby picture. And we hope that we can get rid of the pitfalls.
Any more queries?
Nirosa, I guess there is no more queries, so you can just proceed with that.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm glad to propose the vote of thanks. Thank you for spending your amazing time and your amazing knowledge with us. It's our pleasure to have you here, ma'am. So waiting for more sessions of this. And there's another announcement to everyone. We have another session of ours coming on this 12th. It's basically related on psychology, and all the psychology lovers are, those who would love to know about psychology. It's gonna come. It's gonna be an amazing session where everyone can know more. It's more about depression, and we'll have a set of panelists, a set of speakers, experts gonna be with us. So if anyone would like to contact us to know the more details, the contact will be put in the chat box and in the YouTube live chat.
Thank you, Nirosha, and thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, all my learned listeners.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you for attending the session. Thank you.